Hungarian and Germans, but the most the Hungarian were there. The Hungarian took us to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz already, not the Hungarian, the Germans were there.
We were the very first Jews in Rachov. That was the last day of Passover. We were collected, my father and about 12 families. We brought into a small synagogue and they searched us. We could only take from our home what we can carry, which was very little food because it was still Passover and we were observant Jews. So we didn't have any bread or other things because we were observing Passover. My sister took both of her children and came voluntarily, and her words were to my father, "Papa, whatever happens to you, happens to me." She came voluntarily at that time. They were all gathered, and my father-in-law was the first one to be shot. These people were brought in the following 2 days later to Rachov. The local militia knew that eventually all the Jews will be gathered and brought into a ghetto, but the law wasn't out yet. But we were collected and we were brought to Mátészalka. We were still on an open train. What I mean on an open train, we were just watched. All the 3 or 4 cars, which were with Jews, we were watched by one policeman. But we were so gullible, we didn't believe that something bad is going to happen to us. We believed that we're going to be returned home, that they'll see that it's a mistake or whatsoever, and we're going to be brought back home. It didn't happen. We were brought into Mátészalka, into a very open field, which was an old cemetery, without a tent, without anything over our heads. Eventually, in Mátészalka, more and more Jews were brought in. We managed, from this open cemetery, to go into a Gentile's house. That particular house was also part of the ghetto, but this Gentile, whose name was Bakos, refused to leave his house. And he allowed us to go on the stable on top of the in the stable on top of the attic. We were actually, there was a little hay yet. There were no animals in the stable, but there was a little hay, and we managed with a small little ladder to climb up in the stable on the top, actually on the loft sort of, and that's where we were, without any covers, which was pretty cold yet, but we huddled together, and this is how we managed. We managed to get, my Hungarian is actually perfect, and I played with I was still a child then, and I played with the Hungarian Jewish children, and I came into their house. They did not know that I'm from the Carpathian Mountains. They despised the people, the Jews from the Carpathian Mountains. As a matter of fact, I heard there quite a lot of talk against the Jews from the Carpathian Mountains. They didn't know, and everybody was given an afternoon, I would call it's like a tea time thing. The children were handed 2 slices of bread with jam on it, and I was given the 2 slices of bread, and I grabbed it and I ran home. This is when they discovered that I'm from the Carpathian Mountains, because I didn't eat it, but I ran home with it. I went to share it with my family. That's when they started to be nice to us, and they gave us some flour, and they had an abundance of food because they were home. They gave us some flour, they gave us some oil, but it didn't last long, because the next day we were taken again by train. The living condition in Matisalka at that time I found it terrible, but the concentration camps were worse. But it was terrible because you were with your family and without food and without, it was already hunger was there, but we were still together. This is the advantage we had. At the time that we were in the stable on the attic, there was no organization yet. But I mean, it was not organized. The people that were brought in had to tend for themselves, feed themselves, buy their way into some kind of a shelter. Weeks later, about 2 or 3 weeks later, the Judenrat stepped in, and means it was elected, like in many other ghettos, and they were the ones that helped to organize more shelter, soup kitchens, and other provisions. There were no hospitals there. There were no nurses, no care for any of the ill. I had a very old grandmother who was also brought weeks later from Rachov to Matisalka. She was a very, very old, fragile lady. They managed to open up one room, and this room was like, let's say, 11 by 9, and there must have been at least 100 people laying side by side on the floor, on the bare floor. And my grandmother was among those laying there. We ourselves didn't have any access to any of the soup kitchens or to any other provisions. We were somehow in the beginning where the ghetto started. And it was still, the Gentile did not move out from his home, he remained there. And somehow nobody ever came to look for us, except when we were brought to Auschwitz. We were told by the Judenrat to go together on a certain field to be transported to Auschwitz. We were not told by the gendarmerie or by the SS. We were not told. We were told by the Jewish Judenrat, and they had their own police, the Judenrat Jewish police, which I assume, because we didn't have much contact with the other people. We were there in this particular, nobody bothered with us, and we didn't bother anybody. We just were there with it scooped up in this attic, in this stable. The toilet, there were outhouses there. So there was an outhouse which everybody used that was in that particular backyard that lived. Some of them were in the backyard, in the open, there at this particular place. And we managed, we still had it better than others because we were on the attic there in this stable.
Before they take us to the Matisalka, I have a little sister I had, and she come home and she said, "Oh, they talking there that they take us away," and she was crying. And the second day come the Hungarian gendarme, and they say we have to go, and they took in each house. They took away everything we had, and took us in the bed with the. Yeah, they took us to Matisalka. They took away everything, the gold and everything, and they took us to Matisalka.
Could you tell me how you got food to eat when you were in the ghetto?
In the ghetto in Matisalka, they used to bring us to eat. There we cooked. There we made a gribble, and we cooked. Then we